In a video about 7 Newfoundland-based lighthouses, of course we're going to start with Cape Spear. Cape Spear is iconic, it's very well known. St. John's being the biggest city in Newfoundland, it's a destination for a lot of travelers. So if you come to St. John's, the 2 places that everybody says first and foremost that you have to go see are Signal Hill and Cabot Tower, and of course Cape Spear Lighthouse. Cape Spear is the easternmost point in North America. There are 2 lighthouses on the site. The original lighthouse was built in 1836, and there's a little bit of confusion over whether or not it's the oldest lighthouse in Newfoundland that's still standing. A lot of the lighthouses on this list were built in the 1860s, 1870s. There are a couple built in the 1830s, so if you know for certain whether it's the oldest or not the oldest, feel free to let me know. The tall, slim building is still functional. You can see the light shining anytime you're in the area, and it still functions to help ships coming into basically St. John's Harbor. It's off to the east of the entrance into the port of St. John's, so it certainly plays a role in helping boats coming through the thick fog that the Northeast Avalon is very well known for. If you walk around the site, you'll also walk around the old battery. In World War II, Cape Spear was very important for the defense of Newfoundland. You can still today walk around the underground tunnels, and you can see some of the guns that were placed there during wartime. And there's a lot of restoration over the years, and it kind of deteriorates and they restore it again. But it's pretty interesting to know that you go for the lighthouse, but there's much more to the area than just the lighthouses themselves. If you've watched any of my other videos, you've probably seen the Fairyland Lighthouse. I talk about it specifically like in my tourism related videos because there's a really nice option for you to consider if you're looking for like a day trip from St. John's area and have a nice picnic on a beautiful summer day. There's a company that is based out of the lighthouse that offers really nice picnics. So if you're looking for something to do within about an hour's drive of St. John's on a nice summer day, you can head out to the Fairyland Lighthouse and take part in this offering. But the lighthouse itself is pretty interesting. It is just like most of the lighthouses that you'll find anywhere in the world, located on rugged cliffs overlooking the ocean. So the scenery is going to be beautiful as expected. The lighthouse itself is older. It's from 1871, I believe, is what the sign said for when it was constructed, and it's been in operation, to my understanding, ever since. Fairyland is a town on the southern shore. It's a very, very foggy area, so the importance of a lighthouse cannot be understated. From Cape Spear up in the close to the Northeast Avalon to Fairyland, about halfway down to Cape Race, which I've never actually seen, but is the lighthouse which is known as the place where the original distress signal from the Titanic was received. This is a very, very foggy area, so you can imagine the importance of lighthouses in that area. And as I said, it's fairly close to the city of St. John's. So if you're in the city and you just need something to do for the day, you can drive for about an hour south up the shore and hit up the lighthouse in Fairyland for a nice afternoon. There's a lot of other things happening around the lighthouse area. There's the colony of Avalon, which is a site where one of the original colonies in Newfoundland was set up, and they did an archaeological dig a couple of decades ago, and they found some pretty cool artifacts from the original settlement, and they've set up an area that's very interesting and basically tourism related that you can also check out if you're in the lighthouse area. And one of my favorite areas of Newfoundland, so it's not just a town, it's not just a couple of towns, but it's an entire area, entire region of the province. It's the Bonavista Peninsula. The Cape Bonavista Lighthouse, located right at the tip of the Bonavista Peninsula, is a provincial historic site. My understanding is that it's no longer operating as a functional lighthouse, but there's a museum there, and it's one of the things that's noted is that you can actually see I don't know if it's the original light, but it's an oil-fueled light that was used in the 1800s that you can climb up and check out. So it's pretty interesting, but the thing that sort of stands out about this particular lighthouse, it's pretty. It's, the lighthouse, the building itself is nice. The location is beautiful, as all of these lighthouses are, perched above rocky cliffs. But the thing with the Cape Bonavista Lighthouse being located specifically where it is at the tip of the Bonavista Peninsula, in order to get there, you have to drive up the entire peninsula. Literally, it's at the end. So you have to go through the town of Trinity, Port Rexton Brewery, Skirwing Trail, Champneys West, the historic Port Union, Elliston for the puffins, for the root cellars, for the Sealers Memorial. You then have the Spillers Cove Sea Stack. You have the town of Bonavista, the historic, beautiful town of Bonavista. You have the Dungeon Provincial Park. All of these things before you get to the tip of the peninsula and see the actual lighthouse. It's one of my favorite road trips that I've experienced in the province. It has been recognized by Chevrolet for some corporate thing that they did as the most road trippable town in Canada, I believe, or North America, or whatever it was, some silly corporate thing, but it's real. It's one of these places that the road trip itself is worth the journey, and the payoff at the end being the lighthouse is very satisfying. Once you leave the tip of the Bonavista Peninsula and the Cape Bonavista Lighthouse, you have to drive all the way back down the peninsula, and then to get to Twillingate, where the next major lighthouse on this list exists, is probably way faster to get to if you're able to go travel by boat from Bonavista to Twillingate. But traveling by car, which is the way that we're all going to do it, takes a lot longer, but it's worth the trip. Twillingate is a beautiful town. I have a full video about Twillingate on this channel. Please check it out if you are interested. But the Twillingate Lighthouse, kind of the Crowhead Lighthouse, but actually called the Long Point Lighthouse, is located at Long Point, just past Crowhead, which is a town outside of Twillingate. Anyway, it's a really interesting lighthouse in a way that there's no other lighthouse in Newfoundland that I've seen that's quite like this. It doesn't look the same way. A beautiful stone, maybe concrete lighthouse, painted red, overlooking the ocean, of course, raised above a big rocky cliff. It's where I experienced probably the most Newfoundland moment of my life. So in the summer of 2023, I traveled with my parents and my son to the lighthouse one beautiful July afternoon, and we went to see the lighthouse and just kind of wander around. But this particular day, there was an enormous iceberg in the middle of July, mind you, just off of Long Point, basically on the entrance into Twillingate Harbor. It was mind-blowing to see how big this iceberg was in the middle of a hot summer day. And while everybody was looking over with their cameras, looking at the iceberg, there was a pod of whales that was playing. Looked like they were basically putting on a show for all of us way up on top. It was just an amazing experience. Twillingate is known as Iceberg Alley, and more in the spring than in the heat of the summer that I was there for. It's known to be one of the best places to experience icebergs in the world, but it's also known for whale watching. There are some big whale watching operators that operate out of Twillingate Harbor. We didn't see any moose, we didn't see any puffins, but we covered everything else that would be stereotypically Newfoundland.
Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada.
The town of Heart's Content is on the Avalon Peninsula. It's a town on Trinity Bay on the Bay Verde Peninsula and the greater Avalon Peninsula. Heart's Content is really important for a few reasons. It's a town where the first transatlantic telegraph cable landed, which opened up the world to the possibilities through communication that we've never known before that point. There's a beautiful lighthouse there with the candy stripe design. There's a little park there where you can get up close to the lighthouse and see it, and there's walking trails around there, of course. The lighthouse at Heart's Content was built in the late 1880s. It is still functional. I've seen the light shining when I've visited. It's not open to the public as far as I know. The day that I was there, for sure, it wasn't open to the public, but it's not a huge lighthouse. It's fairly tall, but I don't imagine there'd be much to see in there other than the light itself. But the area is really nice. There's a few walking trails around there, and the town of Heart's Content is just so worthy of a visit, no matter if you're interested in lighthouses or not. The Telegraph Museum that's there, the Transatlantic Cable Telegraph, whatever it's called, museum, and then the Legs Motel and Restaurant is a fantastic place for a feed of fish and chips, or they have a big menu. They have other things as well, but I can't stress enough how good the service was at that place. And the town is a really pretty coastal Newfoundland town that you should just see anyway. Bell Island is in Conception Bay, just off about maybe a 25-30 minute ferry ride from Portugal Cove St. Philip's. Among the 7 lighthouses in this video, the Bell Island Lighthouse itself is the least impressive. It's not an impressive lighthouse, but the location is breathtaking. The history of the lighthouse is also probably, in a lot of ways, it's a little less interesting in a vacuum, but the history of Bell Island is fascinating. It doesn't go back as far as a lot of the history of a lot of places that I've talked about on this channel. Even the lighthouses in this video go back into the 1800s, sometimes in the 1830s. This lighthouse was actually built in around World War II. I think plans were developed for it around the 1930s, and it was built in the 1940s. It was functional over fashionable. It is definitely not the prettiest lighthouse in this video, but the area is absolutely breathtaking. And a couple of years ago, I believe it was within the last 20 years, the actual physical lighthouse, which is not a huge building, was relocated from where it stood originally to where it is right now, a little bit higher up from where it was. There's some worry about erosion of the land where the lighthouse was situated on, and to be perfectly honest, it just looks unstable, although I know nothing about rocks and geology. Where it's located right now is still close enough to the site that if you head out to see the lighthouse itself is probably not going to impress you, but the beautiful, beautiful area right in the immediate vicinity is so nice. There's also a little restaurant, cafe, takeout type of place that you can visit there, called the Keeper's Cafe. I went in as they were opening on the day that I was in Bell Island this past fall, so I wasn't able to actually order much, but they did have coffee ready, so I ordered myself a coffee at least. It's fairly new. There's nobody living at the lighthouse to my understanding, so maybe this is where the residence was, I'm not sure. I should point out that this is not the original lighthouse that was built on this site. This one was, if the original one was built in the 1940s, say, I believe this one was rebuilt about 25 years later, and then that rebuilt structure was moved a little further up on the site to higher ground. The history of Bell Island is not, it doesn't run as deep as much of the history around Newfoundland. Like the timeline starts in the 1800s, but the history is fascinating. Where Newfoundland, particularly Bell Island, was attacked in World War II because of the importance of the shipping lanes and the iron ore production on Bell Island. So they have monuments to that on Bell Island, and definitely worth checking out. There is Dix's Fish and Chips, which I learned was called Dix's and not Dick's. I figure Newfoundlanders often have issues with placing apostrophes in the right place. If you've ever seen, like talking about the buys, you ever seen buys written with B-Y apostrophe S, for example? That's not correct, but that's what happens. So I saw Dick's, D-I-C-K-S apostrophe, and I just figured it was a mistake, but it's pronounced Dix's. The original family who built it was the Dix family. So it's Dix's Fish and Chips. I digress, it's a great place to go. But Bell Island is so close to St. John's, and it's a great place to go for a visit. The lighthouse is one of the destinations that you can add to your itinerary. As I said, the lighthouse itself is not super impressive, but the area is absolutely beautiful. I saved, in my opinion, the best for last. My favorite lighthouse on the island of Newfoundland that I have seen, no question, is the lighthouse at Rose Blanche. This is a one-of-a-kind lighthouse. There's nothing else quite like it in the province. And to be fair, it was reconstructed, so the authenticity is there. It's definitely a monument to the lighthouse that was there originally. But the lighthouse that was built in 1873, I believe, operated for about 70 years, and then it was abandoned. And from the 1940s till about the 1980s, it just deteriorated. It still stood, but it just started to fall apart. And in the mid-90s, the lighthouse was completely restored, built according to the way that it was determined that it was built in the past. And the resulting lighthouse that exists today, that is functioning, is absolutely breathtaking. The town of Rose Blanche is a fairly remote town. It's accessible by vehicle. So if you're on the southwest corner of the province, you're in the town of Port aux Basques. For a lot of people, this is the gateway to leave or to enter Newfoundland by ferry, and the instinct for many people is, if you're not staying in Port aux Basques, you're going to drive north up the Trans-Canada Highway to wherever you're going. But instead of driving north up the Trans-Canada Highway, you head east on Route 470. You're going to come into the southwest coast to some of the most beautiful towns in all of Newfoundland. This is the area that was devastated by Hurricane Fiona in 2022. I haven't been back since before the storm, so I'm not sure how the towns are faring in terms of rebuilding from the destruction. Some of the towns were hit really hard. Burnt Islands, Isle of Mort, I know they were hit pretty bad. I'm not sure how Rose Blanche fared, and I haven't heard anything specifically about the lighthouse being damaged significantly. So hopefully everything is safe where you can actually travel into the lighthouse to see it. But if you can, do it. It's in an area of the province that's often not thought of as a tourism destination, but it should be. You can still get into the lighthouse, at least seasonally. It's sort of like a museum, I guess, where you can see how the lighthouse keepers back in the late 1800s and early 1900s would have lived. They have furniture and there's, kitchen facilities and stuff, and they're not functional, but just for decoration, I guess. It was built from granite blocks, and you imagine like how it was actually stacked together, kind of similarly to the way that Cabot Tower overlooking Signal Hill was constructed. It's just an amazing sight to behold. It's a very unique lighthouse among a group of very unique lighthouses in a very unique location among a group of very unique locations. So this video isn't like a detailed historical description of each one of these specific lighthouses. This is more kind of like to help guide you on a travel itinerary. If you're planning on heading around the province, this is something that you can base your trip around. You don't have to hit up every one of these 7 lighthouses, and as I said, this is just to help you probably prepare an itinerary if you're just looking for something interesting to do to get around and see more of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, specifically the island of Newfoundland, because as I always say, I still haven't been to Labrador. I'm going to make it happen, but because it hasn't happened yet, I'm not including the Point Amour Lighthouse, which is another iconic provincial lighthouse that I may be mistaken about this, but I think it's the tallest lighthouse of all of the ones in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's in a beautiful location. So definitely on my list to get to that location, but I haven't been there yet, so it's not going to be included in this video in any great detail beyond this point right here.